Hello and good morning. Today I thought that since it's going to be really hot later, that before it gets hot I'm going to change the coolant in my motorcycle. I'm riding the 2015 Kawasaki Vulcan S, but this same procedure will work for any motorcycle. I'll just show you a few things that are specific to this motorcycle, such as where the coolant drain is and things like that. But like I say, this procedure is what you do for any motorcycle to change the coolant. And the manual will usually tell you how often to change your coolant, but a general rule is that coolant should be changed every 2 years. So we're going to get on with that. And before we do, a couple of extremely important things is that coolant is toxic and only a couple of teaspoons of it will kill an animal. So make sure you don't spill any of it on the ground. Make sure you keep your pets away. And when you are done with it, with the used coolant, make sure that you take it and you dispose of it properly. A lot of automotive places will take used coolant, and I actually work at an automotive place, and I will take the used coolant to work with me, and we recycle it. So it's extremely important for the environment and for animals that you don't spill it on the ground or flush it or anything like that. It's extremely toxic, so it's got to be recycled properly. So with that, let's get started. Another thing that is extremely important is make sure that your engine is completely cold before you start this process. The last thing you want to do is burn yourself. If you take the lid off of the radiator or the overflow bottle while it's hot, it could boil out and scald you, and the engine's going to be hot. And so just make sure everything's cold, and it just makes it so much safer and easier. Now, it isn't strictly necessary, but since I don't have a garage, I put down a tarp and parked my bike on the tarp. But for two reasons. One reason is so that I don't get my clothes all dirty, but the other reason is so in case I have any spills, it's easier to clean up and it's not on the ground. The first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to remove any plastic trim or fairings or anything that prevents access to the radiator and to the cooling tank. And on this particular bike, Kawasaki Vulcan S, I will show you which things you need to remove and what you need to remove it. On the kickstand side, you're going to need to remove this trim right here. And right there is a 3mm hex key. And then once you get that removed, you're going to need to remove this plastic. There's an 8mm bolt right there. And there is another 8mm bolt right there. On the brake side, you're going to need to remove this plastic, and you're going to need a 4mm Allen key for this top one. Then you're just gonna pull this back and you're just gonna twist it out of the way. An extremely important thing to note on the Vulcan S is right here, there is a Phillips head screw that keeps the cap from coming off. So you're going to need to loosen that before you can take it off, or else you'll mess up the cap and the neck. On the overflow bottle, there is a hose on the bottom that you can take off. Or if it's easy, you can just go ahead and take the whole bottle off and rinse it out. But this is where you would drain it. And then also on a Vulcan S, there's this bracket right here. You have to loosen this bolt so you can take the cap off. So you want to loosen the cap, but don't take it all the way off, because if you take it all the way off, then when you take out the drain bolt, the coolant will shoot across the room or across your yard, and you don't want that. So if you leave it on but loose, then you can control the flow better and it'll just drip down into your bucket. Typically, the drain for your coolant is always going to be somewhere on the water pump or the water pump housing, and it's typically going to be the one that's got a washer behind it. On the Kawasaki Vulcan S, here's the water pump housing, and the coolant drain is going to be this one right here. So you can see there's a washer behind it, and you can either take all this off to get to it, or what I would recommend is just using a box end or open end wrench to get it off. Now the next step in the process is going to be flushing out the coolant, flushing out the radiator and the coolant tank. And so you're going to put the hose back on the coolant tank, and you're going to put the bolt back in for the drain. You're going to mix 50% distilled water or ionized water and 50% vinegar. And the reason it's extremely important to use distilled or deionized water and not tap water is tap water has too many minerals in it, and it can clog up your engine and make it so it overheats. And you don't want that, so it's worth spending a few dollars to get some deionized water. And so you mix that with 50% water, distilled or deionized water, and 50% vinegar, and you'll pour it in, warm up the engine, let it get to temperature, and then let it cool completely before you drain it out. And then we'll go from that point. Once you get everything back put together, put the drain bolt in, and in case I didn't mention before, that's 8mm. Get that in and get the hose back on the coolant tank. You're going to pour in the deionized water, and you want to pour it in the radiator really slowly so that you don't have any air pockets. And then once you do that, you're going to put the cap on, and we're going to start it and let it warm up. Before you put the radiator cap on, squeeze all the hoses to get out any air pockets, and then finish filling it up. Okay, now that we've shut it off, now we just gotta wait for it to cool before we do anything else. And I'm extremely serious about this. Do not be tempted to mess with it until it's completely cool. And so what I'm gonna do while I wait for it to cool is I'm gonna use the rest of my distilled water and vinegar mixture to clean my coffee maker. And I'm gonna make and enjoy some breakfast. Ellie wants you to subscribe. Don't you, Ellie? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. You want them to subscribe, don't you? Yeah. Make sure you put all the coolant and everything in an appropriate container so you can recycle it. Even the water that you use to flush out the engine needs to be taken in with the coolant because it's got coolant in it and it's still toxic. So make sure you do that properly. This is why you want to flush it out. Look at all that. After you drain all the vinegar water out, then you want to just pour regular distilled or deionized water in the radiator and just keep pouring it in until the water flowing out the hole is clean. I'm not sure if it's a sin or not, but I am using Honda brand coolant for my Kawasaki. It's important that you use a motorcycle specific coolant because a lot of the coolant for cars can cause damage to your motorcycle, so make sure that you get a motorcycle specific coolant because otherwise they'll have silica and other things in there that'll damage your motor. So motorcycle specific. So I'm going to put this Honda stuff in there, and the Kawasaki says it takes just over 2 quarts, so we're going to fill it up and go from there. Make sure that you pour slowly so that you can not have any air bubbles. Remember to squeeze the hoses to get all the air pockets out. Now I'm going to start it and run it for just a minute without the radiator cap on it to burp out any air bubbles. And then I'm going to shut it off, put the cap back on, and run it until it warms up. And then let it cool. And then after that, after it cools, check the coolant level, and you may have to add a little bit more. You can see that the coolant level has dropped quite a bit now that the air bubbles are gone. Make sure that you don't forget to put the keeper screw back in the radiator cap so it doesn't vibrate loose or something. Well, now that I got all air bubbles out of it and then refilled it, topped it off, now all that's left to do is take it for a ride. Also, when you check the oil or the coolant level in the coolant overflow tank, make sure the bike is level so you can get an accurate reading. And don't do it when it's hot. You should do it when it's cold. So, alright, well, thanks for watching, and I plan on putting up a lot more motorcycle content in the near future, including a review on this bike. And I know I keep saying I'm going to do it, but sometime in the very near future I really will put a review on the 2015 Kawasaki Vulcan.